I do not enjoy pulling weeds. I hate pulling weeds. It's a pain, but it's also a necessity if you want a well-kept yard. The thing about weeds is that they're a lot like hate to me. Once they're established and allowed to propagate, the effects of their proliferation become exponentially more destructive. So what's the best way to weed? Solutions vary, but I think the most effective way is to pull plants up from the root. Whether a seedling or firmly established, a weed can only be destroyed if the root system is destroyed. How can this be applied to racism? What metaphorical lesson can we glean from the simple but tedious task of weeding a yard or a garden? When seeking to understand anything, it's best to begin with definitions just to avoid confusion. Hate manifests in many ways. One that is the most threatening to societal integrity and order is racism. So what is racism defined? According to the third edition of the Oxford New Desk Dictionary and Thesaurus, racism is the belief in the superiority of a particular race, prejudice based on this, or antagonism toward other races. My preferred definition is from Google, which says that racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Now, what is race? Both Oxford and Google agree that race, in relation to racism, is each of the major divisions of humankind having distinct characteristics. We all know there's another definition of race. According to dictionary.com, the definition I like best is any contest or competition, especially to achieve superiority. I'm going to read that again. A race is any contest or competition, especially to achieve superiority. In other words, there can be only one race, one ruling emotion, or as I like to think of it, one ring to rule them all. If you can't yet see the correlation between these homonyms, know that I'll address the significance later. I also think the etymology of the word race is worth noting, both for its ethnic origin and its ancient meaning. It derives from the Old Norse word ras, which means current, implying forward movement, giving rise to the senses, and also a contest of speed. To keep this moving, I will quickly include relevant definitions as necessary. Feel free to dismiss them, but understanding and accepting how I'm defining these concepts are imperative to grasping my conclusion. I don't know anything about racism in any other part of the world except America, and even as an American, I can't speak to the state of racism in regions other than where I've lived. Ultimately, what I'm sharing is my opinion, and my goal is to share a perspective that aligns with the truth as much as humanly possible. But whether I succeed is for you to discern. Since the arrival of whites to what the Native Americans refer to as Turtle Island, America has always had a race issue. Why is that? Some would say it's because minorities refuse to acknowledge the superiority and also refuse to assimilate into the dominant cultural ethics and paradigm. Of course, no one's going to actually say that, but if one is discerning enough to cut through the deceptive topsoil of communication, that's the basic message. And while I think the aforementioned opinion of the ethnocultural majority is a lie, that's irrelevant, because what I'm talking about with regard to racism is root, not fruit. Returning to my original weed analogy, racism is the above-ground plant and the fruit it's produced. But what is the root? What is the core? What is the heart of this invasive species? Well, I believe it's spiritual. Everything related to humanness is ultimately about our eternal state of existence. Emotions are an important component of our indestructible nature. So what is the spiritual root system at work in racism? Because it's causing a lot of problems. The answer lies in a word included in the Oxford definition of racism, and that word is superiority. What does Oxford say about the word superiority? It is the state of being superior, and superior means supercilious, haughty. Haughty or haughtiness is just another word for pride. So the spiritual weed we're dealing with is pride. America's yard is overrun with it. In fact, The landscape has been so overgrown for so long that the root systems of each plant have integrated. So even if one weed is pulled, another will quickly grow in its place. It's that bad. Pride and hate go hand in hand. They're just different parts of the same organismal and spiritual flora. The adjective haughty means to be both arrogant and disdainful. Disdain is contempt. Contempt is hate. It's impossible to be both proud and humble. I'm going to say that again. It's impossible to be both proud and humble. It's impossible to be both proud and loving. These spiritual realities cannot peacefully coexist because pride is a cancer that consumes all that is good and right and true. Those who recognize this and seek to be like Jesus Christ know that they have volunteered to fight a lifelong war. The enemy is that powerful. Granted, his power, the power of pride, derives from our acquiescence to it, not the devil's actual ability to overcome those covered by the blood of the Lamb. Now, I could go a number of directions with this, and I love rabbit trails, but for now, I'll just leave the points of this video for your consideration. Thank you for watching, and blessings to you. And instead of liking and subscribing, I have a different request. Seek diligently to love and be loved. Thanks again for listening.